because you had been a certain way in the past, right? Whatever it was that caused them to become that way, now's got a grip on them, and now they're not able to break out of that chain of karam, because that's what karam are, just your past experiences, and you become a certain way, right? Your experiences keep you bound, and then whilst you're still, say, in that, your body comes to an end. But then the cycle hasn't finished because you're still in it. So it's now looking for another body to carry on doing that. Yeah? And then it takes on another body. It's crazy. And that's literally Hukmee Sada Pavaiya hai. You're going in this constant circles in this life. So if you die and you're living consciously and you constantly consciously choose love and you constantly choose compassion and you're in bliss, and it doesn't, you're that all those experiences and those cycles don't have an effect on you anymore. That's it, you're free, you've escaped, and that's the blessing. Welcome to the Japji Sahib Podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be answering that question. Within this divine will, within God's hukam, as we often hear it, do we have any free will, or is everything just preordained? Is there somebody sitting there and writing what's going to happen for us in every moment and every minute of our life? So let's dive deep into this second stanza of the Japji Sahib, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, showering us with this wisdom. So if we look at the first line, which is Hukmee Hovan Akaar, Hukm na kahya jai. Over here, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is saying to us that Hukmee Hovan Akaar. The word Hukmee here, we're going to be translating the word Hukmee here to that one, that creator, to that one's divine will. The one that has created the will. Hovan Akaar. Akaar, the word Akaar literally translates to form. And over here, what's being said is that Hukmee Hovan Akaar, from that one's divine will, the entire creation came into being. Whatever we know as form. And often for our minds, it's easier to look at something that's solid matter, and for us to actually look at that to be form. So when we see things around us, when we look at this, we look at a table, whatever it is, it's easier to just see that to be form. Or if when we look at ourselves, look at our body and we see that to be form. But actually, form is more than that. And right now, in this moment, if I ask Preacher and whilst I've been doing this, have you had any thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah, so even thoughts it's a type of form, but even though we can't see them, and we can, and I'm sure we all hope that nobody ever is able to create such a camera where our thoughts could be captured. What do you think, Preacher? You're into cameras, and would you like a camera to be created where all our thoughts can be captured?
That would be mental.
Yeah. So in that sense, to us, we don't see them to be a form as we know form, but still, when we talk about Akaar, actually even thoughts are a part of that creation, and it's a form of that formless. So Hukmee Hovan Akaar, anything and everything that has been created has come from that one's divine will. Hukmna kahya jai. And then Guru Sahib Ji saying, but that hukam, that actual divine will itself, cannot be described. Kahya cannot be said. It's impossible. And when we think about that, yes, we sometimes we're able to understand certain, laws of this creation, but to try and get our head round and try and explain like what that hukam looks like, how that creator has, so the intelligence behind it that is powering everything, that where it's all come from, like it cannot be described. Yeah, so we could look at this. We could look at this glass and we can describe it. But the intelligence of where everything comes from, even the laws as we know it, but the intelligence behind that, where it comes from, cannot be said and cannot be described. So once Guru Nanak Dev Ji set that scene for us, is letting us know that everything has come from that one, then Guru Nanak Dev Ji goes on to saying, Hukmee Hovan Jee Hukm Mila Vadiyai. So whilst we're obviously going through this, we could all do a quick Santhya check as well, just make sure our Lama and Dulama are in place. So when we say things like Mila, so just making sure we're not saying Mile, which is a mistake that is often made. But when we pay more focus and attention, is just to get these Lama and Dulama, all these sounds correct. Hukmee Hovan Jee. So from that one's divine will, Hovan came into being, what came to exist is Jee, which comes, and again, when we look at the way this is spelt, is Jajja and then Jajja no Bihari, and then it's got an Ara. But the Ara here is actually silent. And it's because the Ara is telling us that this comes from the word Jeev. So what we would do here in pronunciation is we would actually just long out the Bihari. So what we'd say here is G. And if it was without the Ara, then it would be G in the context of a term of respect. So like when we say Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Hukmee Hovan Jee. So that's longed out. And Ji here is referring to Jeev. What is Jeev? Jeev is referring to when we've got karam, so lifetimes of experiences from different actual forms that we have all gone through, and those forms we've looked at before, like Guru Arjan Dev Ji brings to light for us, Kei Janam Pe Keet Patanga, Kei Janam Gaj Meen Karanga. So you just, we're here, Guru Arjan Dev Ji gives a list saying that for Kei, for some, or we can say for many lifetimes, Pe Keet Patanga, that we've been Keet, we've been these little worms and insects, and Patanga is more of like an insect that's got little wings, so there was at some point, these are this is how we've gradually reached this point of being a human being. So there was a point where it was like just little tiny, just flying about, flapping our wings, and then if we actually go further down into this Shabad, when we go past if we preach and go down to Mila Jagdish Milan Ki Bariya, but then if we go to Kei Janam Sal Gir Karya, so this is what we don't often talk about, is that there's been many lifetimes where we lived as Sal are rocks, Gir are mountains. And then, so this is kind of where we've evolved from, or, that would probably be the best way to put it. It's where we've all evolved from. So all of that memory that's been traveling. And so when memory and then body comes together, and what holds these together is the breath. So you've got memory, physical body, and then the breath. And within that is always the soul. So soul is just referring to what's within an actual form. And actually the soul is just God, is that one. So there's no different to the formless, the God that is within this area here. So this, as we know it, as just space. But even within that one exists, just like Guru Nanak Dev Ji tells us. that jal thal mehiyal par por lina. So saying jal thal mehiyal par por lina. And within the jal, that one exists. And then within the thal means the jal, sorry, water. So within the water, that one exists. Within the thal, that one exists, meaning the tarti, the earth. And then mehiyal. So when we look at the word mehi often refers to, again, the tarti, the earth. And then al refers to the sky. And then this is referring to mehi al, that space in between all of this. Yeah, so all of this. And we sometimes think of, oh, look, God within us and then God actually, it's all the same. So that formless that is within this space here, within the air, and then the air is held in the space, in space. And then within that space is still that one, is still the formless. So is just so subtle. And it's actually the same. There's no different. It's not that the soul is different to what's within this. So in that sense, you could even say that whatever's within the air is the soul of that one, because it's still within. But we normally would think, oh, that's outside, so that is now God. And this is soul. And we get it all mixed up. Right? But actually, it's just all one thing. It's not different. Yeah. And even within the space is that one. And that is then, you could refer to that as a soul. Then you wouldn't need to use the word God. Then you could just say it's just soul. Everything is just soul. Yeah. Because it's referring to the same thing. Sometimes we just get ourselves mixed up. Yeah. Like language can never be used in a perfect manner to describe that formless. Okay.
When you look at the creation, is there something beyond the creation? That's the one.
Yeah. So
if you just pretend the whole creation's a circle, there's like the one outside of the circle as well.
Yeah. So the best way I would say to look at it is because you can't imagine formless. Yeah. So in that sense, that formless is just there, consistent, constant, within everything. Yeah. Imagine that's just there. And then if you now started removing, say if you started now removing parts of the creation. Yeah. So if you just removed earth, formless is still there. So as in, like, when we think creation, we often just think of our little world, as in earth. Yeah, so outside of where it's not like a geographical location and place that here's all the creation and then, oh, there's God. Because it's not, because formless isn't physical. How can you say then God is outside there? Because that would be then a form to say, oh, Dick.
Found you. Hide and seek.
So if you now, this is why meditation is so important. And when we start to connect and you start to realize, and when you go deep inside and it's just that silent, that stillness and silence, that sun, mandali ek jogi baise, like Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, that, got that? Yeah, there we go. Sun mandal ek jogi baise. If we look at that now, sun is this absolute silence, right? And when you experience that, it's this just, you end up calling it nothing when we try and use language. But it's not nothing, it's the formless one. And it can't be located in to say, here's the creation, there's outside. It just is, exists. So if you throw all the creation out and it's gone, it's still there. There's nowhere where it isn't. There's nowhere you can go where it isn't. It's within, it's without, it's whatever words you want to use. Even Guru Sahib Ji will say it's inside, it's outside. But what Guru Sahib Ji is trying to say to us is when we're looking at that Jal Tal Mahil, that formless is just everything everywhere. But even if we look at it, like just if we try to really simplify it, let's just say we could do what you're saying. Imagine if we created some sort of, I don't know, spaceship, right? And so, let's go for a little ride. Yeah. And then we got to, this end of ever expanding creation to whatever exists, different types of, from to the end of whatever multi-universe is. Just say if, there's no such thing, say if we was to do that. And he's saying, look, that's it. We're done. No more creation after this part. Like, even if you go to that part, that formless is still there. It just is.
Be such.
Yeah, it just is. So if we come back to is describing the Jeev. So the Jeev is Karam, which are just experiences, and until then, there's unfinished kind of an unfinished account, and then there's desire still exists that will then attract body, and then those two are held together with breath, and then within that is soul, and that's referring to then the Jeev here. So for us now to understand the context of this body, if we now here refer to the Jeev here as the human being, so let's take this now to be the human being. After going through all those different life forms like we spoke about of Guru Arjan Dev Ji, and I know we went on a bit of a tangent then. Then Guru Sahib Ji says, Hukm mile vadiyai. Within that one's divine will, mile, we received vadiyai, this greatness. Something that is so great. And what is this that's so great? Is that we've received this to be a Jeev, to be this human being now. Why is it so amazing? Why is it so great? And when we often look at this line, it just normally the way we receive it is like we're left to think, oh, okay, so that sounds a bit like I would first look at this line and look at the translation, I'd find it quite random. I'd think like talking about something really deep here, talking about Jeev, and then randomly it sounds like, and then some receive greatness, like, and glory. It's like, okay, sounds a bit random. How does that fit into this, body? I don't know if that's ever come across your mind. Yeah. But it's actually referring to like, this is the biggest gift that we can have. We've made it to this human life. And I often think about that it's in one sense quite freaky. Like, this is it. We're at the pinnacle. We're at the top, meaning that we're the only ones that can reach that level of consciousness of realizing the truth and the formless. And this is it. This could be it for us. And then I think, am I living to that? Am I living up to that, of being a human being, that of receiving this greatness, the biggest thing you could ever anybody could receive? We get caught up so much and so quick in the game. It's actually just this big game and we get sucked in and we become the actual, the actors and the actresses and the characters, and we just think, this are me, huh? And he's like, this is me though. When you think about like what is even me, when we say this is me, like what are you? And because I was thinking the other day that if we look at it on a physical sense, when we just keep thinking, yeah, but I don't know, this is me, isn't it? Like, say if now I was to put on a few pounds in the next few weeks, right? Extra, I went on a eating spree, put on some pounds in the next few weeks, then I'm thinking, well, that's me. And then I'll go and lose it again, and then, oh, where's it gone? Like, who was I referring to as me? It's not even there anymore. But there's something that still exists within me. And then I was thinking, well, what about thoughts and memory? Say if I've had a new experience in the last month that I've never had before. I was exposed to something completely new with my senses. And then based on that experience, if I tasted a new food or something happened, someone said something to me, and then I have thoughts based on that. And then those thoughts that I have towards that experience, based on that experience, and then from that, it evokes my emotions. Then I think, am I that? Well, no, because even before that experience, I still existed. And before that experience, and before that experience. And so then you're left with that question, then, like, what am I then? And that's what this is what Gurbani is actually all about, is getting us to do that with ourselves, is to ask ourselves that question. And then Guru Sahib Ji go on to Hukmee Utam Neech. So the translation that you're going to be seeing is within that one's divine will, Uttam. Uttam literally means high, but we've translated it to good. And Neech literally means low, but we've translated it to bad. Good and bad might not be the perfect translations or choice of words that some people might connect to. But if we just left it as high and low, it's not going to say much to us, because we're going to again start thinking on very physical terms, that according to the divine will of that one, some are going to be up there, some are going to be down there. What does that even mean? Then does that mean that like God's up there and God's not down there? So what this Uttam Neech means is that now this answers that question for us that we asked in the beginning, in regards to that whole preordained, that in regards to free will. We have a choice of actions, but we don't have a choice if those actions are going to make us Uttam. And Uttam here, if we take that word as being high, but don't think of it as in physical high. And if we take that to be Uttam being close to that one, and when we're not resisting that one, and we're actually experiencing what it means to be with that one. And that could be when you're with that one, you're just in this constant state of love. You see everything, everyone, you don't discriminate. But we can't choose what it is, what actions are going to get us close to that one. That is preset by that one. We have to play to that one's game to become Uttam or Neech, to become high or low. Low would be when we get so deeply caught in our ego, and so caught deeply into our ego, and we're in this complete duality, and from that place we start to act in arrogance, looking down at others. And that's what it means to be Neech. And when we don't actually want others to do good and prosper, and when we actually want others, to remain below us, that's what it means to be Neech. I can't say that actually I'm going to choose my actions, and I'm going to get to choose whether I'm Uttam, I'm high, I'm good in that sense. So don't take the translation of good so literally in that way, but good just meaning here that I'm in the lapse, I'm with that one. Huh? You can't say to me now that pretend that I'm going to hate on you and I'm going to be Uttam and I'm going to be then close to that one. In that way, it's everything is within that divine will. Does that make sense? And what a lot of people, how they look at this is to say, we haven't got a choice. That one chooses if we're high or low. But it's not saying that. It's saying that Guru Sahib then goes on to use the word hukam likh. That one is scribing for us accordingly to what we are doing. Yeah. And dukh, sukh, and then from when we're doing something that is uttam. So for example, now if we look at this line in this way, look at it together, if we look at it like slightly different to the way I've just described, if we look at it this way now, that when we do something that is uttam, when we do some form of, our actions are pure, divine actions, we could call it that. We have to use all these different, funky terms nowadays. Then when we do something uttam, then we get scribed for us what? We get scribed for us sukh. So that it's like almost like we're saying to God through our action to write for us sukh, to experience peace. Because the truth is, every time I act out of uttam, meaning that high divine action, and that could be where I'm compassionate towards you, within compassion itself, it's such a pure action. Within that there is sukh. In the moment you're experiencing compassion in yourself, it is sukh, it's peace. That is, we could translate to happiness. The moment I'm wishing good for you, that is me getting God to scribe sukh for me, happiness for me. Does that make sense? But then the other way around, when I'm doing something Neech, when I'm filled with this fire of jealousy, for example, which could be seen to be Neech, a lowly action. Yeah? Like, how do we know that our actions are low? And how do we know that? Because then what we're doing is we've got scribed for us dukh. We don't often see it that way. When I'm in this state, that when I'm burning in jealousy, for example, and I'm thinking, oh man, like how comes they've got that? They shouldn't have that, right? And because that's jealousy is that. So sometimes people say, well, isn't there a positive side to jealousy? Only if it doesn't get to that point of where we're thinking they shouldn't have that. Why have they got that? It should be me. Yeah, but if originally it just makes you feel that, oh, they've got that or something in that way, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, it's actually an indicator to me to say, is there something I want to strive for or whatever? Yeah. So in that way, it could be okay, but it becomes negative. And when gurus, that's why it's so important to get it clear what interpretation we are using for a word. So when we're using the word jealousy from the perspective of Gurbani is only talking about jealousy from that place when you're burning because somebody's got something. that means you don't want them to have it. You'd rather have it, but you don't want them to have it. So it's in that negative. So when you're feeling like that, in that, Guru Sahib saying, you've just got on yourself written dukh. It's like I've said, here you go, grab the pen and just write some dukh for me. But I've given that pen to God to write dukh for me through my actions. Yeah? And for one, me experiencing the jealousy in itself is dukh. Because in that moment, I'm not happy, am I?
You think it's Hana, you think it's Amrit, but it's actually poison.
Yeah, it's actually poison. And because if you really analyze it, in that moment, you're not experiencing being at peace and happy, are you? So that in itself is Bijay Bek Mange Amrit, right? So you are actually, sowing poison in that moment. But even from that, you will see that your body, it will actually take your body into a more of a stress response. So just the actual, what comes from it is so negative. Yeah. And then what you're doing with your brain as well, you're firing neurons in your brain that are negative, that aren't going to serve you. So then you end up just becoming negative as a person. So hukam lek dukh sukh paye hai. Paye hai means we receive, and we receive based on our own uttam and neech, high and lowly actions. Yeah. And then in that way, then sometimes when people are so against the word bad and good, right? And it can help us to understand. So here, it's not so much to say that the person, in the sense that God's creation was bad or good, because it can't be. But it's when somebody's caught up in their ego, the actions that come from the ego can be high or low. And then Guru Sahib Ji saying to us, Ikanaa Hukmee Bakhsees. And this Ikanaa means like ek jane. So one lot or some, we can say. Yeah. So some within that one's divine will. Ikanaa Hukmee Bakhsees. Bakhsees here, from the word bakshish, it can translate directly to blessing. There's some that receive that one's blessing and the ek, and then there's others. Ek means others within that one's divine will. Hukmee sada pavaye, constantly or always sada pavaye hai. Pavaye hai means when jado koi firda hove, basically going round and round. And somebody is going round in circles. Let's look at this now. Break this down. The bakshish here is referring to that there's those that actually end up receiving that one's grace because of their ways in life. They've managed to tap into that uttam, the more pure actions. Yeah, and then through that, they're receiving the bakshish of sukh. They're not just receiving the bakshish of sukh, of that happiness. They're actually receiving this bakshish. What blessing is this talking about? Is the blessing of breaking out of that chain of our karma, of where our karams, we were stuck in them. The memory had sucked us in so much that we wasn't able to live consciously at all. And we were just going round in circles based on our past and actions because we hadn't awakened. So now we keep falling back into the same old patterns instead of living consciously. But receiving that blessing means you've received that blessing now that you've actually cut yourself out of living in that cyclic way. You probably to make it a bit more relatable, sometimes you find yourself in life and you end up thinking that I'm all right now. You might be a certain way. And then, like, say if, I don't know, it could be that end up always being about a bit snappy or a bit bitter or a bit cold with somebody. And then you think, no, I'm all right. Like, now I'm not doing that. And then every so often, and then you kind of fall back into it again. And you're like, oh, I'm doing that again. And then you're all right for a bit. And then you go back to it again. And that's literally Hukmee Sada Pavaiya hai. You're going in this constant circles in this life. Because you had been a certain way in the past, right? All those experiences, whatever it caused for somebody to become cold and bitter, right? Whatever it was that caused them to become that way, now's got a grip on them. And now they're not able to break out of that chain of garam, because that's what garam are, just your past experiences, and you become a certain way. And then you don't break from it, and you keep, and then, so that's what it means. Pavaya means you keep going in this cycle of things. And then next thing you know, like, it's 6 months down, a year down. And then every time you think you become unconscious again, it's been a month, you've been all right. And then you've been a month, and then you fall back in, and you go back in circles again. But that circle then becomes bigger. Because that if you've not broke out of that circle now, whilst we've still got this body, then that circle carries on into life and death. Because now you're still not broken out that cycle of, say, being cold and bitter, because you start living unconsciously again. That karam keep you bound, right? Your experiences keep you bound. And then whilst you're still, say, in that, your body comes to an end. But then the cycle hasn't finished, because you're still in it. So it's now looking for another body to carry on doing that. Yeah? And then it takes on another body. And then you keep going in this. It's crazy. Right? And that's Sada Pavaiya. But becoming conscious and living Uttam, in where we tap into a way of what takes us back to that one and allows us to live consciously, then we receive sukh whilst we're living. We receive peace and happiness whilst we're living. And then that is then the bakshish, the actual blessing is that you've now escaped from that cycle. So if you die and you're living consciously, and you constantly consciously choose love, and you constantly choose compassion, and you're in bliss, and it doesn't, you're that all those experiences and those cycles don't have an effect on you anymore. That's it. You're free. You've escaped, and that's the blessing. Eko Hukmee Sada Pavaiya hai. And we keep thinking, oh, but it's God chooses and writes for us. I'm going to keep you aimlessly wandering and being stuck in this cycle. But that's not true. It's dependent on what we are doing, then is what God scribes for us, what Vaheguru scribes for us. Yeah. So if you're going to remain caught, you're going to remain being stuck in your ego and being bitter, for example, then you are going to now remain going in cycles round and round, and then then it's about, how do we receive that blessing? We've got to tap into it. And all of Guru Granth Sahib Ji's Bani is telling us, what actions we've got to be doing to escape. And then this is where it gets sometimes a little bit confusing for some people, I know, because I'm just thinking of some of the counter questions that might come from that, so that we clear that up. And they're saying that, but I thought everything was just based on grace, on bakshish. And some people say bakshish is random. Bakshish isn't random. Bakshish, that grace, that blessing, there's a process to it, to receive it. but we have to play to that one's will to receive it. If you look at Gurbani, there's a pattern throughout. And that pattern is Nanak Gareeb Teh Pya Dware. Like, if you jada insan tap on that, the one that actually then lowers themselves in humility and lowers themselves and steps away from their ego mind, and they then receive that har mel leho, that one will then unite them back. Right? And there's always a process. It's never like I'm just sat there in the midst of doing whatever and then all of a sudden, bang. Yeah, there's something that we've placed ourselves in that position and then it's happened. Hukmai Andar Sabh Ko, bahar hukm na koe. That here Guru Sahib is saying that Hukmee Andar Sabh Ko, that everybody is actually subject to this divine will, that nobody can escape it. There's just like there's no way around it. To be a part of the creation, we are going to be a part of that divine will. So many questions that we can carry on answering, but it would make sense to leave some of those questions for, we've got so much more of Japji Sahib to go through. And then when you do start looking at each body, literally you think like more or less every question could be just answered from this body, but we'll scatter them and, we'll spread them. And instead of me trying to think of all the counter questions that could come, we could answer them through the other stanzas that come. Hukmee Andar Sabh Ko bahar hukm na koe. Nobody's outside of that divine will. Nobody can escape it. And then Guru Nanak Dev Ji here says, so the Bisram is on Nanak. So the way we would actually pronounce this line is Nanak Hukmai Je Bujhai Ta Hukmai Kahe na koe. So the Bisram, the first short pause is on Nanak, and then Hukmai Je Bujhai. Bujhai, we say that a little bit, as we say in Punjabi, ka sake bolna ya. Guru Sahib is saying those that actually start to understand that one's divine will, and what that means is when they understand that actually we cannot escape that one's divine will, that actually how can I bring my ego forward when I know that I have to play to that one's game, then I can't really bring and speak in ego then, can I? Home kahe na koe. Then nobody will actually say anything in home because they'll naturally have to remove their ego and recognize that there's somebody else here that's at play. There's somebody else. There's that one that has created the will for me to have to play to. And when you start realizing that, then you step away from your ego. So, and I'm sure the question that we started with has been answered through this body. And you've got to deeply contemplate these words to start capturing what Guru Sahib is actually, the wisdom that the Guru is actually giving us. And because for us, each word of Gurbani is helping us to step away from that ego so we can realize that one and experience that one. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this podcast, the second stanza of Japji Sahib. Let's keep growing closer to that one and walking away from the layers of ego that we have got stuck in. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share and subscribe. Please donate and help spread Guruji's message. Link is in the description below. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.